Hello again, everyone. This is Frank Tamora, and I'm going to give you some other updates for May 17th, 2011. I'd like to invite you to go to my website where you can download my documentary on Bible prophecy and current events called The Last Chronicles of Planet Earth. Go to www.bibleprophecyman.com. You'll see that site posted on my video right underneath where I'm speaking here. So let me get right to the point here. I'm going to cover some news that came out of the DETCA file concerning Syria and Israel. As you know, I've been giving a lot of information about Psalm 83. Psalm 83, for those that are not familiar with this, is from the Old Testament and is a prophecy about a war that hasn't been fulfilled yet. And simply it states the very nations, and it names them point blank, and Syria is one of the nations that will be attacking Israel in the last days. The bordering nations around Israel will be coming down against Israel, and we know that this is going to be a war that Israel will win, just like Ezekiel 38, when that war comes, when the Russians and the Iranians and these other nations like Turkey and these other nations come against Israel, they will also lose that war because God will intervene. But first of all, we have to see what happens with Psalm 83. That hasn't been fulfilled yet, and Syria is going to be playing a major role there. Now, if you've been watching the news, you've seen Syria is having massive problems with their own people, and there have been rioting, and there's been a lot of killing in the last week and a half in Syria, where Bashar al-Assad is killing his own people. And according to the news source, DECA's, which is a very reliable source from the Middle East, is showing us that there's going to be some other flare-ups. And this is the name of the article. It says, Obama to get tough with al-Assad. Syrian-Israeli flare-ups expected. Now, one of the things that I've been warning about is that watch more intense activity within the nations that are in the psalm, because we know that the paving stones are being set in place for the psalm war to take place. So you really need to pay attention to what's happening with Syria. It says, Washington sources reported exclusively that Barack Obama has finally resolved to stamp down hard on Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in person as the man responsible for the inhumane Syrian crackdown and a protest against his regime and a massacre of hundreds of dissidents. Before his much-awaited speech on the U.S. relations with the Middle East Muslim nations Thursday, May 19th, which is only 2 days away, Obama is preparing to impose sanctions on the Syrian president. The White House is working on the final text of the announcement, but has already decided to recall the newly appointed U.S. ambassador to Damascus, Robert Floyd, for consultations. An American ambassador was last recalled from Damascus in 2005. They're recalling, every time I hear about recalling ambassadors from Syria, it reminds me of Isaiah 17:1. Isaiah 17:1 says Damascus is going to be completely destroyed. It's going to be left in ruinous heaps. And if there's a major confrontation and Israel goes up, or the United States, and Syria is wiped out, then you'll know why there's a possibility why these ambassadors are being recalled from Damascus. But we do know that eventually Isaiah 17:1 will be fulfilled. It goes, the administration has also decided to authorize the International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna to report to the UN Security Council that Syria was building a plutonium reactor for military purposes at Lazor, which was bombed by Israel in September of 2007. Damascus has refused to cooperate with the nuclear watchdog in making the site available for inspection. The IAEA is therefore urged to seek the same Security Council for Syria as those imposed on Iran for its nuclear activities. Now, Barack Obama was finally convinced that Assad must be stopped without delay by the horrifying discovery of the hastily dug mass graves near the protect area of Dara in southern Syria. The civilian death toll for Assad's savage 3-month crackdown on dissident is now past 1,000. So we've seen a lot of people being killed by his own government, which again is Matthew 24/7, kingdom against kingdom. They're fighting against themselves. It is taken into account the Decla's Files military sources report, though American measures targeting Assad will bring forth heightened Syria-Israeli border tensions. Now remember, this is what I've been warning about, potentially in the form of a limited Syrian military strike into Israel or Lebanon, or both. And when you read Psalm 83, you'll see that Syria and Lebanon are two of the nations that will be involved in the Psalm war. So when we hear this kind of news, we really have to pay attention to what's going on. Indeed, our cousin Arela Mekilov threatened that instability in Syria would cause instability in Israel. The expectation of trouble to come was strengthened by the information reaching Washington, Syrian military intelligence, that Ahmad Jabil's PFL General Command had organized the forcible crossing of the Israeli border on the Palestinian Nakba, or Catastrophe Day, Sunday, May 15th, of thousands of Palestinians streaming out into the camps in which they held near Damascus. The operation was also synchronized with the Lebanese Hezbollah. These are all enemies of Israel. So you saw the march to coming down against Israel. Again, this is only a prelude to the Psalm 83 war. It says, according to this information, Syria and the PFL GC are planning another mass invasion or insertion in the same format for June 5th, the 44th anniversary of the 1967 war, when Syria lost part of the Golan Heights attacking Israel. So not only do we need to be watching what's going to happen in June, because if Syria makes a move and he does try to force his people to go down after Israel, trying to deflect some of the things that his own government is doing, he can advance troops with Lebanon. Israel will retaliate, and it could ignite into a full-blown war. And this is exactly what I think Bashar al-Assad really wants. And so it says, in advance of the event, the Israeli Defense Forces and the Lebanese Army have reinforced the units guarding their borders and are on a high state of preparedness. The IDF, which is the Israeli Defense Forces Engineering Corps, have embarked on a crash operation for building a proper defense system with physical objects along the 220-kilometer Israeli-Syrian border in place of the fragile fence that crowds of the Palestinians trampled on May 15th. So Israel is getting ready for what they believe will be another insurgent in June. Now, what is important for us to remember that June not only is, we may see this kind of insurgent, but Turkey is sending 15 ships around the same time in June, or the second week in June. So it may end up that these things will be coordinated, so we need to find out. But in any case, Israel said that they would stop the 15 ships, and you just see that the Psalm 83 war is coming to a head. It may be taking longer than most people expect, but we see that the event is actually coming on us. Now, God only knows what's going to happen when these 15 Turkish ships, or these ships that are boarding, that will have different people from different countries. And some, when you read the news that I posted at my site a few weeks ago, some major people from the European Union will be on board these ships as well. But Israel did say that we have to protect our sovereignty, and if anybody tries to go to the Gaza to deliver anything there, they will stop them. So we have a potential for war from the Syrian, from the Lebanese, and also from these Turkish vessels that we're coming down. These are really hectic times, but these are the times that Jesus warned about and the prophets talked about. And again, they're centered on Israel. They're centered on why? Because the Arab nations want Jerusalem. They want it back. And this is essentially what Zechariah 12:3 talked about. In the last days, all the nations will come against Israel because they burden themselves over Jerusalem or Israel. And we know for a fact that, as I posted today, that anybody that burdens themselves against Jerusalem or Israel will be wiped out. So I don't say this lightly. I tell the people who live in these countries like Syria and Lebanon and Saudi Arabia and Egypt that please, if when your commanders tell you to go down and attack Israel, just reflect on what God had warned you, because if you go down there, you will be destroyed. And I know that you don't believe this, and I know that you have faith in what your Quran says, but there's a challenge here, and you will find out that the Word of God is going to be steadfast. And what happened on the Carmel when the prophet gave, when there was an exercise where God wanted, or they wanted to show who the real God was, and so we saw that the prophet called down and destroyed on the altar. There was a fire that God sent down and destroyed it, and it showed that God was real. And we know that in the last days, you can't mess around with the Word of God, and God is going to show everybody that He is, in fact, the true God, and everything that He said will come to pass. Now, for those of you who don't believe this, all I can say is wait, watch the news, and when you see Psalm 83 take place and you see the very scriptures come alive, please give your life over to the Lord, because we don't have much time left. We don't know when the Lord's going to take the church. We do know that it's close because all the signs are here, so you need to be prepared every day, including today, because we just don't know. We know that it's near. God bless.